Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another Burlingame. It's a small town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. This is Mark Lucchese, also known as Mark at the Bike, and my guests today are Colonel Alden Cunningham and his wife Carol. Alden and Carol will have been married 58 years this June. The Colonel has written a book titled A Cold Warrior's Report, A Lifetime of Leadership and Service. Today's conversation is going to be about that book, the Colonel's early years, his military life, his marriage to Carol, and raising two girls while moving from base to base several times in his military career. And now my conversation with Colonel Alden Cunningham and his wife Carol. Colonel and Carol, thank you both for being here today.
We're delighted.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Colonel, I'm just going to sort of jump right in. I'm going to take it from your childhood days of being in Arcadia, but then all of a sudden your father or your parents buy this big home, a lot of land, 7 acres in San Mateo. The Hain Mansion Estate, is that what that was about?
Yes, exactly right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. As you say, we lived in Arcadia for about the first 5 years of my life. And we owned a fairly big place there, too, about 6 acres on Foothill Boulevard. And then we moved in 1946, and my father purchased it, 7 acres, 5th and El Camino, probably sometime around June 1946. And he purchased it for a price of around $60,000, I think. I saw that on the back of an envelope.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that's right, but that's about what it could have been. So we lived there. I lived there for about 12 years. My father passed away the following year of a brain tumor. So he was gone about a year after he purchased the property. Now, it was quite a mansion, the Hain Mansion.
Was it on El Camino or was it up the street a little bit?
It was at 5th and El Camino, right where the
gym
fitness
is,
center,
across the street from Fitzgerald
and
Field.
the Westlake office building.
Yeah.
And we're right across from the ballpark. And the property extended back about the whole block. And, about a third of the way through the property was a Hain Mansion.
Yeah.
Built in 1890, had about 5 bedrooms and 5 baths on the second floor. You walked in and there was a beautiful big den on the right with a picture window looking out over a circular driveway filled with, and the grass there was filled with quail. And on the left, as you walked in, there was a music room with a Steinway piano and an elevator that took you to the second floor because old Mrs. Hain couldn't get up those steps anymore. Then as you get deeper in the home, there was a dining room on the right and a covered porch on the left. And then beyond that, there was a living room, a large living room my father used as an office for a while. And then there was the kitchen behind the dining room, and then upstairs for the 5 bedrooms and 5 baths. I won't get into all the detail of that. And a couple of small rooms, one of which was a chapel. Because the priest used to come and say mass at her home, and that was the Hain Mansion. In the back there was a big barn that my mother let the Boy Scouts use, and at the very end of the property there was the old Parrott estate. And I remember my father walking me back from the Hain Mansion to that property sometime after he purchased it, probably in late 1946, talking to me, and I don't remember what he said, but I imagine it was something to do with what he planned to do with the property. And then we got to the old Parrott Mansion. That was sort of vandalized. There was broken glass on the parquet floors. That's how it was all laid out. But there were one of the two big family names in the 19th century.
Oh,
Parrott
indeed.
and Hain.
Yeah,
and
indeed.
So we picked up on that, and we lived there for 12 years, from 1946 to 58.
About how old were you when that was going on?
Okay, I was 5 years old when my father came up and purchased the property. I was born in 1941, March 6, 1941. And I lived there till about 1958. I think we moved then to San Carlos into 2 homes while we were building a home on Parrott Drive in Hillsborough.
So you were at the Hain Mansion for about 12 years, is that correct?
Exactly right.
So when you moved to San Carlos, give me an approximate age if you can.
Okay, I was about 17.
Okay. Carol, what was going on in your life at that particular time? You hadn't met Alden yet. He was just Alden Cunningham. Where were you during
Alden
this?
Cunningham was much older than I was. But the funny thing is, I followed him at St. Matthew's. I reluctantly went into the kindergarten class only because my father came along on the street and threatened me if I didn't gently go into the schoolroom, because I was promised a nun and I was getting a lay teacher, but I got over that very well and followed him through St. Matthew's.
Now, how far behind were you? I mean, when you say you followed behind him, how far behind?
I say 3 years,
Okay.
he says 2.
Okay, well, that's pretty close, really. And you were Carol Cocconi from the Cocconi family, what's well known on the peninsula.
Exactly. And I was born in Mills Hospital, and I lived in Burlingame, and I had 3 homes in San Mateo. And I was definitely a native of the area,
Yeah.
and very proudly so, until I went off to high school in Mountain View, California.
Where did you go to high school?
I went to Holy Cross, which was a brand new school. We were the first class of freshmen and then a new class each year, so we were the top class for 4 years.
Great.
Yes.
Okay, Alden, back to you now in San Carlos. The home was being built on Parrot, is that
Parrot
correct?
Drive, 1030 Parrot Drive.
Okay, so what happens now?
Well, let's see. We 1958, 59 was my last year at Santa Fe Military. So let's backtrack to.
Yeah, let's go back a couple years,
yeah,
'cause I want
let's
to find out
yeah,
how
let's-
you
yeah.
ended up in military school.
Yeah, let's backtrack to a point in another key point in my life, and that would be 1951, 52, and my mother took my sister and I to Mexico City because she had a sister who lived in Mexico City, and we went down there, and I was in the American school, and so was my sister. I was in it for my 5th grade year, and I was about 10 or 11 years old. And I spent that year there, and I learned how to speak Spanish. And that was critical because later in my life, I would become a Spanish-speaking foreign area officer focused on Latin America. So that was another big moment in my life. We came back after a year, and that's when my mother put me in the Santa Fe Military Academy.
I have to jump in for just a second. How did you feel when she put you into military school? Was that something you were looking forward to or asking about?
No. It was probably the farthest thing from my mind. I wanted to play baseball, even though I was one of the worst baseball players in the world. I just loved baseball. And I really missed it when I was in Mexico City, although we did play a little bit of softball, or I can't remember what it was. But anyway, no, I wasn't anticipating that, but she was kind of impressed by all the admirals and colonels and generals that she met during World War II in San Francisco. And so she thought this would be good, and my father was gone, and I think she felt that I needed a manly environment to be in, and so she decided she was going to send me there. And that's where I stayed for 7 years.
How old were you when you went there?
I was just entering the 6th grade. I would have been probably around 11 years old.
Yeah, and so you, so it carried you through what would have been high school years as well?
That's right, all of middle school and all of high school.
Okay, and Carol, you were down at
Holy Cross.
Holy Cross. Is that high school still there?
High school? No, unfortunately.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
It joined St. Francis.
Oh, it did?
Brought the women across the street.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's go talk about military school for a minute because that really, I think, is very interesting. I never knew anybody that went to military school till I met you. How did you like it?
Well, as I mentioned in my book, one of the first things I recall about the whole thing was you had to make your bed. And you had to make it really tight.
Yeah.
So tight that if you flipped a quarter up and it would hit, it had to bounce. Now, I don't know if I ever got my quarter to bounce.
Oh, I think we saw a couple quarters in our house lately, Dallas.
Yeah, well, I've been testing it. But no, that was one of the first things that hit me. And then, of course, the military formations, the shining of your shoes, the wearing of the uniforms. And but it did get you. It was a junior ROTC school, and it was a good military school. But there was some people that were there because their parents couldn't handle them, and
Correct.
they just offloaded them on the school.
Yeah.
I don't think that was the case for me, although who knows. But it definitely helped me by managing my time management, discipline. Having to take care of myself pretty much. And I didn't come home that often. I must have come home on average during the school year, maybe once or twice a month for a weekend. And then, of course, during the summers. But most of the time I was in the school.
Yeah.
And what I remember about that, some anecdotes is, we had study hall. We had to go to study hall at night, and then I think on the weekends they would show old movie tone news clips of World War II, and they're good instructors. It was a prep school, and I still remember Dr. Hinton, who was the superintendent, and Mr. Robertson, who was the headmaster. And I just grew with the school, and I remember some of my teachers. They were good teachers.
So in your book you stated that that really started you on your military career that would follow for 51 years.
Correct.
Right? Right. So you started to get the military feel. You kind of got into it. You were buying into it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So you graduate from there, you leave military school, and you enter West Point.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm just going to jump to Carol for a minute. Hold
Sure.
that West Point for a second.
Okay.
So he's a couple of years ahead of you. So he's at West Point, getting
Correct.
ready to go into West Point as a plebe, a freshman, right?
Mm-hmm.
You must have been around a junior maybe or a senior at Holy Name?
Holy Cross.
Sorry.
It's all right. It's a holy. It's okay. Probably about a junior.
Okay.
Probably about a junior.
And I know that you went on to Santa Clara.
Well, not before Gonzaga. I went to Gonzaga in Spokane for 2 years.
Great.
And then Santa Clara became co-ed. So that's when I transferred back here. I'd had enough of the cold weather, so I came back down to the peninsula, and we were in the finest class of 21 women as we entered. And, of course, that was very difficult because Santa Clara at that time having to convince the young men that there were going to be women on campus. And they had to dress up their act a little bit.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until actually much later, I was about a junior, and I was introduced to, I had a phone call that my friend Carol Stefanik had her date for New Year's Eve at the country club needed a date. He was home on leave. And would I be interested? And I was delighted for the opportunity to meet someone new and exciting, I thought. And so fast forward very quickly, we have a blind date. And that started out very well. We ended up with a family dinner the first night at the club, and I'm sitting there with all these people, and they're calling him Alden, and I was introduced to Mike. And we finally got acquainted, and we, after about a dozen red roses the following day, we went to the Tonga room, and we ended up New Year's Eve having a marvelous evening, and the rest is history, as they say, because then he took off.
But you were at Santa Clara by then, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And you're back at West Point as a
Back at West
freshman,
Point.
as a plebe.
Well, that would take us back in about 4 years.
Okay.
And I'd been the cadet battalion commander at San Rafael my last year there, and that kind of set me up with the discipline, the planning, and things like that. So I was reasonably well positioned. I was familiar enough with military things that the shocking first days at West Point, which were quite, let's say, rigorous to say the least. In fact, the whole first year, I had to brace every time we left our room, almost anywhere we went, except in the classroom.
Just for our listeners, because I read the same thing in the book, the bracing, is that where you hold your
chin in?
Your chin in most of the day?
Well, it's when you're, I can't remember all the specific areas that we were supposed to brace. In the mess hall, when you're eating. Obviously, when you leave your room in the barracks. And I can't remember whether we had to brace when we walked to class or whether we marched. I think we marched to class. And I could be wrong about that, but I think that's right. And that was the whole first year. And there was only 3 answers you had: yes, sir, no, no excuse, sir. and of course the honor system there, and it was just it was a fairly pressure-filled environment. I think it was meant to be that way, and I'm sure to a certain extent it still is. But there's no bracing at West Point now. In fact, when I was there for my 50th reunion in 2013, they gave us a book this thick of all the things that had changed since 1963, and so now it's, in my opinion, not too far from just a regular university or college, except you're wearing uniform and you march in parades, and there is discipline. I don't think all of that's gone away. I'm almost certain it hasn't. I'm sure there is still the pressure, academic pressure, pressure, military and physical, depending on how good you are in those areas, and there's still a pressure there. So that hasn't gone away. I'm sure there's strong discipline and all the things that we had before, except maybe lacking the bracing and sort of and that type of thing. But there's still a lot of pressure.
Upon graduating from West Point, what was the military commitment before? See, I'm trying to figure out when you decided, aha, I'm going to make this I'm going to make this a lifetime for myself, right? And I'm going to go marry Carol. I'm going to talk her into this, but we'll get to that in a minute. When is there like a 4-year commitment after you leave West Point?
In those days, there was a 5-year commitment. I think after that, 3 years in the reserves.
And you leave as, excuse me, I'm sorry, you leave as a second lieutenant?
Second lieutenant.
Uh-huh.
And you get your diploma, Bachelor of Science. In those days, West Point was only one elective the whole year we were there. Now you have majors, about 36 to some odd majors, and maybe 2 years of common curriculum and 2 years in your major. So it's I mean that I'm not sure about, but I think that's kind of how it works these days. But when I was there, it was 60% engineering, 40% humanities, and one elective, which I took in Spanish.
Yeah.
But as I grew, through that whole process, and I graduated as a second lieutenant. I'm not sure if I had the military firmly in my mind as a career at that point. But after I served in Germany, I think from then on, I went to Vietnam after Germany. I think by the time I was through all that, I was pretty. I was planning to make the military.
It was a career path then.
Yeah.
So, but when you went to Germany, though, you were just dating Carol. Is that correct? You guys hadn't gotten married yet.
No, we had not gotten married yet, but we were engaged. And
that's right. Her father wanted her to graduate from Santa Clara before you guys got married. Is that correct? Is that what I read in the book someplace? Maybe.
Something like in those days, where I wanted to make sure that I had my degree before I became married. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you leave West Point and go to Germany?
Go to Germany. That was my first assignment. Now, before I did that, though, I went to artillery basic course.
That's right.
In the fall.
Yep.
And that was about a 2 or 3 month course. Learning the basics of artillery, how to operate it within a battery and a battalion, four observer, things like that. And then from there, I went to airborne school. And of course, I won't get all that detail, but I went to airborne school. It's a 3-week course. The first week, just general airborne things, and then the second week is a tower week. And I remember I was in the swing landing trainer late that week, and a sergeant or somebody ran out of a nearby office building about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The date was 22 November 1963, with the horrible news that President Kennedy had been shot. And that whole weekend was totally surreal. After airborne school, I went to Ranger School. Now, that was a 9-week course, 3 weeks in Fort Benning.
With the idea of becoming an Army Ranger?
No. No, that was just one of the things you did. I mean, you went to airborne school, you went to Ranger School, and, if you went to Ranger School and you were, that's something you really liked and you were set up for that, then maybe you would try to get into the 75th Ranger Regiment. And I'm not sure how they're organized these days, but I think that's how it was handled then. I went through it, and I got through it. I think I had 4 satisfactories on the patrols that I ran. One of the things I learned, as I mentioned, I think, recently with you and others at the seminar we had last week, is that if you're going to have a successful patrol or have a successful life, you need to pick the right point person to get you to where you want to be. And that's what you had to find, if somebody who could actually get you to the objective. And again, in life, I think that's sort of a metaphor for life. I think you need a point person. So the second 3 weeks was in Dahlonega. That was a mountain phase. And the final 3 weeks was Naval Air Force Base, which is a jungle phase. And the first 3 weeks at Fort Benning were mainly learning how to patrol, or learning how to conduct ambushes, things along those lines.
So when you were in Ranger School, or in the book, I have to quote you. I thought this was really interesting. And I quote, "While I'm entitled to wear the Ranger tab by virtue of successfully graduating from Ranger School, I am by no means a Ranger. In my opinion, only graduates who go on to join the 75th Ranger Regiment should enjoy that title."
Yes, and that's, I think yes, we all wear the Ranger tab, but to be a Ranger, you have to go to a Ranger unit, and you don't get into that unit very easily. It's just like the SEAL training and all of that. I mean, in Special Forces, you have to have a special calling, I think, to do that. And I really didn't have that calling. That wasn't what I was just a regular soldier, not
Yeah.
and I think I have the highest respect for all the Special Forces, Rangers,
Indeed.
and SEALs. So they are a very brave band of people.
So would this been around the year 1963 when Ranger School was completed?
Yeah, it would have been in late '63. And actually, I spent about the first half of it, and then there was a Christmas break. And that's when I went back, and that's when I met Carol.
Okay,
It was
right.
December
Yep.
1963.
At the country club, the date and the whole
the
bit,
the
right?
oh what a night, the Four Seasons song.
Yep,
That's our
yeah.
song.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then you guys dated for a couple of years.
Well, not
We-
really.
We were together for 43 days from the time we met until we walked down the aisle.
No kidding.
Yes, sir.
Because I went off to Germany, and she
Yes.
was still here finishing.
I was finishing my
Did
senior
you make
year.
a visit in Germany? Did you visit him in Germany?
Yes.
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 That's when
Yes.
we got engaged. That would have been in 1964.
Right. Then you guys got married in June 19th of 1965 at St. Matthew's Catholic Church in San
correct.
Mateo,
Yes,
which
we
it
did.
really isn't on El Camino. Back in those days, it's where is it, Carol? Fourth
It
or
was
Fifth
on-
Avenue?
It was near
Where
the
is it?
post
was on-
office in downtown San
Yes,
Mateo.
Yes.
right.
Third in Ellsworth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
crazy. Okay, I'm just going to kind of scoot along here on some of these topics.
Please
Sure,
do.
sure.
So you're married in 65, and then first daughter Susan is born in August of 66?
Correct.
And then you get deployed to Vietnam in April of 1967.
Correct.
So your daughter is about a year, give or take, or not even that
Mm-hmm.
maybe. What's the feeling of leaving your newlywed wife Carol and your daughter Susan?
Well, I've only taken
Susan
I've only
going
taken
home?
2 Valium pills in my life. I took one on getting on that plane to go to Vietnam, and then about I don't know 20 some odd years later, I was a captain when I went to Vietnam. As a full colonel, Defense and Army attaché, somewhere in the middle of my tour in Nicaragua,
Yeah.
the embassy nurse prescribed me a Valium to take because it kind of quiet my nerves. But yeah, I was I had some trepidation. I didn't know what was going to happen.
Well, yeah.
Didn't know where I was
it
going to go.
A turbulent time. I
Yeah.
mean, it was-
And as I pointed out, in that seminar, I had heard that I was either going to go to the Special Operations Group. Remember, I said I didn't think I was Ranger and that type of thing.
Yep.
Or I could have go as a senior artillery battalion advisor of the Vietnamese Airborne Division. Now, I'd been in an airborne outfit in Germany, had made 29 jumps there in addition to the 5 I had at airborne school. So at that point in time, I had 34 jumps. I made 9 administrative jumps in Vietnam because I was an airborne unit. And that would have put me up to 43 jumps, and then I had a jump at West Point. So a total of 44 jumps in my life.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and yeah, it was.
Carol,
Sir.
excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
Colonel, I have to ask you, your husband's going off to Vietnam. You've got almost a 1-year-old baby girl. How's that feeling? What was that like for you?
Well, I wasn't taking Valium in those days. But, it's preface to say that when you married someone in the military, you became part of that organization as well as an Army wife. And first of all, love conquers a lot. We believed in being in the military together. We worked together, and I was extremely proud of what Alden was doing. And it was my responsibility, and I accepted that role, to handle the situations at home so that he could do what he was best trained to do.
Boy. Is it about that time, or when you left Vietnam, you said, I'm just going to make a career out of this? I mean, did you go tell Carol, I'm sticking, I'm going to make this
No,
happen?
I don't think that thought ever crossed my mind. I think I was going to be a career military probably, for sure, after I left Germany, and probably after I left West Point.
Yeah.
I think that there was read in my book that, there was a possibility I would go to a certain artillery battalion stationed in Baumholder, Germany, a big training area. But it turned out by serendipity, I ended up in the 50th 81st Artillery in Wiesbaden, Germany, which was an airborne unit. And, officers there, most of them were going to make a career out of the Army. Whereas the other unit, I think, were a lot of, in my mind, I don't know if this is true or not, but I thought they were reservists, all fine officers, good men. But I think they, you know, their mindset was 5 years and out, you know, or whatever this deal was. Go back to my family business or start another business or do something like that. So I think it was better for me to be in that more career-focused group of officers. And it wasn't so bad that it was in Wiesbaden, Germany, and not in, you know, Baumholder.
And this is when, Carol, you joined him then in Germany with your daughter, right? Is that,
yes, we were living in Germany. But the point I want to make is from the beginning, the fact that this man went to West Point, we were both convinced this was going to be his career.
Yeah, I really, yeah.
Was there any forethought or any thinking of, oh my gosh, we're going to move from base to base to base to base? Or, I mean, you guys moved. How many times did you move, Carol, during his career?
Only 18, Mark.
18 times. That's, to me, is incredible.
Yes, and I think the important note here is because of that, the idea was you moved in and you got the paintings on the wall as soon as possible so that you had the continuity of the family being in one area regardless of where the address was.
So were you living on the base or were these homes off the base? How did all that work?
We for the most part, I think we lived off base. There was only a couple of times, like at West Point, that we lived on base. When we got to Germany, we were living on Kapellenstrasse in what used to be a mansion. It was broken up into apartments. And then about halfway through our tour, after we got married, when she came back, I think we moved to Heidelberg, which is a military set of quarters near the post exchange. So then we spent, I'd say, maybe half the tour in civilian quarters and half the tour in military quarters there. And then from there, I went to Vietnam from Germany and on. But yeah, go ahead.
In 1969, second daughter Jennifer is born.
Yes.
And you guys moved to Spain.
Yes, but the interesting part there is we were in Long Island when she was born, and we barely found the hospital. I mean, it was just arrive, find the hospital, the doctor, and welcome Jennifer.
Yeah, the sequence there was I got back, went to the artillery advanced course, and that was about a 9-month course. And then in the spring of '69, we moved to Washington, where I had a little refresher course in Spanish. From there to Long Island, where my mother rented a place there for us, and then after for Jennifer, because she was pregnant with Jennifer at the time, we delivered the baby there in June of 1969, and then I immediately went to Middlebury College, where I had to take this 6-week summer course, which is part of the master's degree program that West Point was paying for, and then from there the family went to Madrid. We spent a magical year in Spain. And then came back and I served from 1970 to 73 at West Point.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in just a moment because I want to go back to Carol. So, Carol, you must have learned Spanish as well, living in Spain? Yes.
I was not grammatically correct, but I got my point across and loved being with the Latin people. It was a delight. We did a lot of entertaining. In places like Mexico and Spain, you bought a head of lettuce. You washed it each lettuce leaf at a time and sanitize them before you could make a salad. So little bits of challenging times for sure.
And the girls were in school in Spain?
Susan started in Spain in a Montessori school at the age of 3. And we were very, very fortunate that we had some delightful au pair girls that would stay with the girls at times so that I was in a position to travel a little bit with
We traveled
Alden.
almost every weekend. We either fly to distant parts of Spain or we drive.
Yeah, you gave some good details about that in the book.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you go back. It's from 1970 to 1973. You're back to the States, and you're at West Point, and you're teaching.
I'm teaching.
What an honor.
I'm teaching Spanish, and we're in the Department of Foreign Languages. The first couple of years I taught there, I was teaching first year, and I was also acting as a coach when the squash team, because I played squash at West Point, and I think I was coaching the freshman team, and so I did that. And in the summers I'd work in the tactical departments where I got that last jump. And then, but the last year I was there, I taught second year, and I ran the whole second year administratively as well as taught along with others Department of Foreign Language Spanish group. So that's kind of how that went. And then I was selected for the Command General Staff College, and you wanted me to kind of pick it up from there.
Well, let me just ask a question or two. How old were you? More or less back in your West Point teaching days.
Okay, West Point teaching. I was about 30 years old when I got there, 29 when I got there, and about 3 years later I was in 30.
Boy, how young to
30.
be doing that.
Yeah.
And Carol, you must have been, I don't know, 27, 28, 26.
I guess I was.
Yeah, that is amazing. Okay, so before we move on, when did you pursue your real estate career?
I didn't pursue real estate until '84 when I got back to the States. But what I found that we were doing with each assignment, we were making contributions. And I'm very happy to say that, for example, when we lived at West Point, I was responsible for the art show. And I think this is probably part of the fact that we put the paintings up very quickly. Usually that's the last things that go up. But when you're only in a house for 10, 11 months, you want to make everything worthwhile. So we got involved in different activities to enjoy the area and the people.
So while teaching at West Point, did you think, I might be here for a long time? I mean, you were only there for 3 years. Did you know that you were going to be there just for 3 years?
Yes, absolutely. And I was selected for the Command General Staff College, so I went to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, following West Point. And that was a great year. We had a wonderful year. The focus there was on tactical and operational level division and corps operations, some military history, and some rudimentary computer work, which was very, very rudimentary.
Okay.
And so that was Command General Staff College, and then from there I went to Korea.
And let's see, you went to Korea by yourself, right?
Correct.
Carol and the girls stayed home.
Correct.
Yeah.
In Kansas?
No.
California. You moved to California.
Mexico, California.
Well, yes. While I was in Korea, at least the first half of that time, Carol went to Mexico to get deeper into Spanish. She took Spanish lessons while she was there, and I think
we knew at the time when he went to Korea that he was going to follow the lines of the foreign area. The foreign area program. So he took the girls to Mexico, and we lived there in the same apartment complex that your aunt lived in. And we put the girls in the Catholic girls' school, where they spoke Spanish, and I went to the Zona Rosa and took classes while you were gone.
Yeah, and that was for about 6 months, and then Carol came up and she visited me.
I visited you
Yep.
in Korea.
With the girls?
No. It was very challenging to leave Mexico. We had diplomatic papers. No, we didn't have diplomatic papers till we got later. Yeah. So it was a challenge to leave, and that was a fiasco. But I left and prayed that my daughters would still be in Mexico when we got back.
Yeah. Okay, take it away, Alden. Continue
Okay,
on.
well, Korea, I was the XO of the 1st 38th Artillery, then moved to be the 2nd Division Assistant Chief of Staff, Civil Military Operations. It happened to be a perfect transition to the Foreign Area Officer Program, which I was about to embark on. And so after Korea, I went to the FAO school at Fort Bragg for 6 months. It was an honor graduate. And then from there, we went to in-country training in Mexico.
Boy, back to Mexico.
And we were assigned at Guadalajara, Mexico, and my job was to travel all over Mexico and all over Latin America, and then write reports about what I experienced and what I did, and turn them into the Assistant Army Attaché in the embassy. And it was a very, very nice year. And then from there, I went to the Pentagon, and one of the things that I wanted to emphasize here, coming into the FAO program, is that FAOs need what I call the 6 Ps. Passion for your area, what you're doing. Preparation, and all of this training was part of that. But if you were going to go to a certain place, like Argentina or Mexico, You read up on it. You became sort of a mini expert on that area before you got there. So that's the preparation. The purpose is the what and the why. In other words, the mission and the motivation. In other words, what do you want? What are you trying to accomplish, and why are you trying to do that? And I lay that out in my book with the Nicaragua assignment in pretty good detail. And then plans. You need to figure out how are you going to increase your resources. How are you going to where are you going to travel to and when, and all of the lines of effort. And so those are the plans, and then you have to perform. And then you have to produce.
The 6 Ps.
Attaché is producing information reports to send to Washington. And if you're a mill group, instead of an attaché, you're producing security assistance programs and working with the host country to improve their militaries, and because they're allies of us, and sell equipment.
Would you do me a favor? Would you explain what a military attaché is? Because at the conference last week at the library, a lady said, well, it's a spy. Okay, I remember just her distinctly saying that's a spy.
I think I disabused her of that idea.
You did. So for our listeners, can you tell everybody what a military attaché is?
A military attaché is someone who represents their country in a foreign country, and your job is mainly to collect military intelligence, but to do it in an open way. I mean, you may have sources, or you may use open sources like newspapers or whatever, but you'll have various kinds of sources, and you're going to cultivate some of those sources, and some of those sources are just one-time opportunities, and then your job is to sit down and write an information report, and you usually start out with a summary, and then you get into the meat of it, and maybe you'll do a little analysis at the end of it, and then you ship it off to the powers that be within the embassy, and if it's approved, it goes off to Washington and a whole bunch of different addressees. And before you leave for your country, you go around to just about every little office there is in Washington and other places, like I think Charlottesville. Is it Charlottesville? Yeah. And there's people there who want to know about the electrical grid. Maybe not exactly everything to do with the military, but basically you're there to collect military intelligence because you work for the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Yeah.
But you're not a spy in the same sense that the CIA officers are, because you're not paying anybody.
Right. So you worked with the attachés, or were you an attaché yourself?
I was an attaché myself.
Yeah.
I was one of the best attachés in the world in my time.
I wanted to get to that.
In
That's
my
great.
time. In my time.
Yep. Okay. Continue on.
Okay, so from my first assignment in the foreign area field, though, was in the Pentagon. I was a political military officer. I was working in the political military division of the Strategy, Plans, and Policy Directorate under DESOPS, Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations. Now they call it the G3. And that's the operations side. And my job was to make sure that the generals didn't go off the tracks with respect to political military issues. And my main work there for the first 18 months was as the Army's principal action officer for the Panama Canal treaties. And the treaty, we don't have time for me to get into all that detail, but suffice to say that once the treaties were signed and before they were ratified, there was about a 6-month period there from September to March, April, when all of these requirements that came out of the fact that the old canal company duties and everything were going to shift either the government of Panama or the government of the United States. And if it was the government of the United States, the Army, being the largest entity in Panama, was going to collect the majority of that. So my job was to take these requirements that they thought they had, coming up from the Army component of Southern Command, through Forces Command, to the Pentagon. I had to make sure that they were justifiable requirements that we could defend in Office of Secretary of Defense, Office of Management Budget, the U.S. Congress. So that was my job for 6 months, and it was a very interesting job.
Well, okay, so at the end of the day, each day, you come through the front door there. Hi, honey. Oh, yeah. Hi, Carol. Blah, blah, blah. And would you share things with Carol in the evening, or would you kind of keep it close to the vest?
No,
Or
I would share.
did you probe a little bit, Carol? Like, okay.
What'd you do today, honey?
Yeah. Who'd you spy on today?
I don't know. I didn't know. You didn't do any spying in the Pentagon.
No, I know.
It was basically, some days I didn't even know if I'd eaten my lunch.
Yeah.
And a couple of times I had to spend all night there. But,
Yeah.
And I go over that in my book. But I think I was, not any detail that I'd share, but I mean, it was, got enough at the office without bringing it all home with me. But
Of course.
I don't think I kept, Carol would know more than I don't believe I got into a lot of that, no, but we might have gotten into some of it.
And we're speaking about your time at the Pentagon right now, is that
Yes,
correct?
that was 1977 to 1980.
Okay, Carol, what were you doing, and what were the girls doing?
Well, this was the first opportunity we had to buy a house.
Yeah.
So we were
out.
delighted. We were delighted to do that, and the girls went to a local school. On the humor side, it was rumored that Alden had never seen the school. It was a little occupied.
Yeah.
Somehow.
It's a
it had
little
other
like-
things
Yeah.
on my mind.
And when someone in the military works at the Pentagon, it's rather interesting because they don't appreciate the Washington area as much as the women, because finally you're close to a department store and you have an opportunity to live like other human beings live, and it was a wonderful time.
Great. Continue.
So I think one of the other things that Carol did is it was the first time she had a chance to go to work.
Yes. Yes.
And
yes.
I'll let her talk about that if you want to say a few words about that.
Sure.
No, I started out, I think my first paycheck came from Bloomingdale's, and like any other woman, I gave the money right back to the store.
Yep, you bet.
And then I ran a travel agency and a travel school, which was right down our alley.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
And,
indeed.
and then I worked for Michael Evans, The Economist in Washington, which was a challenge because I was commuting to Washington, but I was also starting the trip with Alden and the gentleman that worked at the Pentagon, so I was commuting with them.
Yeah, and then she takes up the
Metro.
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 Into,
Yeah.
So after the Pentagon, we went to Mexico. That was from 1980 to 83. I was assistant army attaché in the embassy there, and there I basically did. I was an attaché. I collected information. I doubled the office production, and I also received the Legion of Merit while I was there for work I did in the Pentagon. And I'd also gotten a certificate of achievement for the work I did on the Panama Canal treaties, which would have become a medal later, but wasn't authorized at the time. So anyway, those things. But yeah, the embassy was. I was reportedly the linchpin of reporting. I was the one that put it all together, and I think they were writing about 250 reports a year when I came there. And after, when I was there, we wrote about 500 reports a year.
My goodness.
Yeah, so I was churning them out every pretty much
indeed
almost
you
every
were.
day.
And at the same time, we were also taking down cutlery, plates, dishes, with the idea that we were going to be doing quite a bit of entertaining down there because we were attached to the embassy.
Yeah, and you do you have sources again. You invite people to your home. You try to cultivate relationships, and you travel. I traveled in one of our trips. Aguas Calientes to visit the zone commander there, and I must have visited every military zone in Mexico. But in this particular occasion, my wife accompanied me, and they were about to pick me up to take me to the zone commander's office. When Carol rushes in, she'd been at the pool. She'd stepped on a shard of glass
Oh,
in the
boy.
bottom of the pool, and her foot was all bloody. So the Mexicans took her to the hospital, got her fixed up, and by golly, the best Army wife ever. She was there at the dinner that night.
Amazing.
With the commander.
Drinking tequila and having a wonderful time.
That is the team spirit.
That is a team spirit.
Amen.
So, but yeah, it was a great tour in Mexico. But I won the State Department Honor Award, or the equivalent thereof, for the report I did on the Mexican Armed Forces political clout and how they use it. And that's a very rare thing. I mean, usually that's reserved for State Department officers or consular officers. There's 2 reports they select every 6 months. So that was sort of a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was an indication that, and I was being, my narratives, my official reports, best attaché in Latin America, one of the best in the defense attaché system, and on like that. But my career took a hidden hit there, and I mentioned this in the book. And I don't want to get into all the details of it, but it got sorted out later. But my senior rater had given me a top block, his first rating, then gave me 3 straight second blocks. And all the narratives were so nice and good that I thought, oh, everything's fine. And this was a new efficiency report because they change them every few years because there's inflation. And when everybody starts getting max reports, they're worthless to do. So later on, you see in the book that I got that sorted out because he didn't tell anybody he changed his rating philosophy.
Yeah.
He was only giving the top spots to the DATs who were lieutenant colonels,
Yep.
or in hot spots in Mexico, and I was not the top dog in Mexico. So anyway, so that was Mexico, and then from there we went to the Army War College. And I developed regional appraisals, advanced courses, and did all kinds of professorial things.
I'm going to stop you for a second because this has been on my mind since I read the book.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between West Point and the
Army War College?
Yeah.
Well, the Army War College is the most senior service college that there is. There's a kind of a progression. And I'm not sure how that progression works these days, but in my day, you went to the basic course for your branch, then you went to the advanced course for your branch, and then if you were, you were doing well, you got selected to Command General Staff College, which is kind of an intermediate level of to teach you how to be a good staff officer working division staffs, corps staffs, and maybe the Army staff, and understand military operations.
Where's it located?
It's in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
Okay, so it's not something you go from high school instead of going to West
that-
Point. I'm
that's
going
a
to go to
mid-
the Army War
that's-
College.
That's a mid-career thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Army War College, though, is the culminating point of the military officers' military education. Unless they make general officer, they get additional education then.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where you go from the very black and white, you get this option, to the very gray, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment. It's at the strategic level. In other words, you're taking lieutenant colonels and colonels and getting them ready for work in Washington or on a high level staff somewhere in the world under a geographic combatant commander, and whether they make general or not, and very few people make general. Most of them are going to be working in capacities as full colonels supporting the more senior officers. So they have a better understanding by the time they leave that, there may just be a whole bunch of bad decisions out there. And you have to think about, what are we going to do with China, and what are we going to do if you invade Taiwan, and what's going on in Ukraine these days. I mean, these are all volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environments, and you have to be able to help the senior people, or if you're a senior person yourself.
And the Army War College is in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and that's how we got there. Because we came from Mexico, the Army War College, and I was in charge of the Americas. In other words, Latin America. It includes Canada too, but the Americas part of the world.
Is that where you're splitting your time now, is in Carlisle?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. So for our listeners out there, Alden and Carol split their time between Burlingame and Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Probably more or less maybe 6.5 months in Carlisle or Pennsylvania, and about 5 or so months here in Burlingame.
Correct.
Exactly.
And boy, so continue.
So
Fascinating.
moving right along, after the Army War College, where I gave speeches, attended conferences, participated in the U.S. Information Agency programs in Honduras, Venezuela, Colombia, and Peru, talking about U.S. policy in Central America. After that tour ended, I had volunteered to go to Nicaragua. Now, at that point, after I left the War College, I was put back on the colonel's list. I didn't make it. I was passed over, but then I was put back on the list because of the appeal that I made. And when I volunteered for Nicaragua, I had no idea that it seemed like a remote possibility that I ever see full colonel. But oh, geez. Okay.
That's okay.
Anyway.
Just a little phone call coming in,
No,
folks.
that's a little reminder that I have a pill to take.
Oh, good.
But anyway,
Did did you get down to
I
Nicaragua?
volunteered in Nicaragua. It was a hot spot, and they were looking for somebody to volunteer. I decided, what the heck, if my foreign area officer career is worth anything, I'll volunteer to do this. Because it's a hot spot. The Sandinistas were in charge. And along with the Pentagon, Pentagon and Nicaragua were the most consequential tours in my career. I think I did my best work there.
Did you go down there, Carol, with the girls?
I visited.
Okay.
I did not. I did not go there.
So there was a separation time again.
Yes, there was no education available for the girls.
We had about 3.5 years apart. There was a year in Vietnam, a year in Korea, and then the year and a half in Nicaragua.
And this is about the time where I started my real estate career.
Okay.
I was in a house long enough to get everything set up, get the paintings on the wall, and then I would look for something to do and either volunteer work or to go into work. And I decided that I would try real estate. I wished it had been here. I could have retired a lot earlier.
Yeah.
But it was a wonderful experience, and had a lot of good times. But at that time, Alden went to Nicaragua. I went down to visit him, and they of course lost my luggage.
Oh, boy.
But Alden had two little maids who washed and ironed all their clothes and hung them all up for me and said, "Senora, please take your pick." And so for the different social functions, I had clothes to wear.
Oh, cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's the Nicaragua, as I said, I did over 600 reports along with my air attaché, and over 19 months there, and the ambassador recommended me for promotion to brigadier general. He was really taken with me, I guess. But then I got a letter of appreciation from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for the work I did in Nicaragua. And there was it was an interesting trip that I made that I mentioned, but we don't have time to really get into that. You'd have to read the book. But
Right, and that's what we want folks to do is read the book.
that got me in the Washington Post, the L.A. Times, and the local paper there in Managua. Now the Second War, after that, my last tour in the Army was the Second War College tour. And I had expanded responsibility of all the regional courses administratively, plus handling my own, and the advanced course that I ran. But I did generally the same sort of things I did the first tour. And then I retired, and I wanted to get into. And then after that, I did Army 13 years as an Army contractor, working in the Department of Distance Education, and also developing scenarios for the strategic crisis exercise. To get the details of that, you'd have to read the book.
Absolutely.
But the other pillar of my service, and the title of the book is, A Cold War Warrior's Report, A Lifetime of Leadership and Service. One of them is my military service, and the other is my Rotary service.
Yeah.
And I, Rotary is an organization of 1.2 million business and professional leaders united worldwide in over 200 countries and territories to conduct humanitarian and educational projects across the 7 areas of focus, promote high ethical standards and vocations, and support world understanding and peace. So that's your elevator pitch for Rotary.
You were also district governor.
I was district governor. I was, of course, a club president initially, but I was district governor. And some of the things I did as district governor, I mean, we had a service project where with Mexico, because I tried to do what I did my group study exchange with Mexico, and I worked with Olga Devlin, who was the wife of the brother of the former president of Rotary International, Frank Devlin, and we did some amazing things. I mean, we gave 400 wheelchairs. This is all part of a wheelchair project, a much larger wheelchair project. 400 wheelchairs to Mexico. We doubled the computer lab of a school for the deaf, provided clean water to school children, hundreds if not thousands of them, conducted 36 cleft palate operations, and 70 plus cataract operations, all in a combined way with the district in Mexico. And that was probably my biggest thing that I did, but I also focused on leadership. That's why I talk about leadership and service. That was my motto as a district governor. And then I also focused on awards, because I feel awards are important for people to be recognized and to be thanked for what they've done, and inspire others to do them. But anyway, that and expanding and improving district committees, key committees like foundation and membership. But those are the things that I did, and there was a bunch of other things I can't get into right now because of the time constraints. But the key takeaways for me is the value of persistence and perseverance, that family is everything, everything. And I think everybody knows that family is everything, at least I hope they do. And my philosophy of life, be good and do good. And of course, a lot of that's through Rotary. Work hard, but work smart, and have fun. And that's it.
I think that is so well said. I really do. And I think that the way you speak of Carol in the book tells me of the wonderful partnership that you guys have had for 58 years. And for you to move that many times, Carol, what was it, 18?
Yes.
18 times.
You know, as a result of those moves, we have two dynamic young women, our daughters,
Yep.
who have married incredible young men. And from those unions, we now have 4 amazing grandchildren that are very excited about life
Yep.
and opportunities, and we could not be prouder.
Yeah.
It really has been a great journey.
Oh, so before we go, how about a little shout out to where people can find the book?
Okay, they can find that book on Amazon in either the Kindle e-version or in hardcover. And all they have to do is go to Amazon's Alden Cunningham book, and then a Cold War Warriors report.
Yeah.
There's also a long string of numbers and letters that if you would like me to
No,
read that or not.
we'll
Okay.
find the book.
they'll
I found the book without using all the numbers and
okay,
letters.
good.
I
We'll
just
leave
put the
that
title
alone.
in and boom, up it
It came
came.
up.
Leave that alone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
a great
yeah.
book, and I urge everybody to read it
Yeah.
because it's just some great history here of the Bay Area, the Peninsula, San Mateo,
Right.
the Cacconi family.
Well, Mark, we thank you for the opportunity. This
Well,
has been a delight.
I
Really.
hope so. I'm
Thank
honored.
you so much.
But before we go, I'm just going to say, Alden and Carol, thank you for a lifetime of service in the military and the Rotary, but most of all to yourselves and your family. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I'd like to thank retired Colonel Alden Cunningham and his wife, Carol, for being my guest today on Burlingame. It's a small-town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society. Thanks to Kathy and Shelby for editing and producing, the great Ray Tyler for videotaping, my musical director, Bray, and you can hear more of Bray at bray.com. This conversation was recorded on Monday, March 13th, 2023. The Burlingame Historical Society copyrights this podcast, and no part of this program can be rebroadcast or copied without the permission of the Burlingame Historical Society. So until next time, everyone, see you around Burlingame. It's a small town.